Florida summer of 1972, summer heat thick in the air. But on the edge of southwest ranches, where the trees grow wild and the roads twist like snakes, something old had awakened. The farmhouse stood like a forgotten relic, tall, whitewashed and cracked by time. Vines clung to its bones, and the shutters creaked with every passing breeze, like whispers through rotten teeth. When the family arrived, Michael, Jenna, and their two children, Tyler and Lily, everything seemed quiet, too quiet. The locals had avoided the property for decades. They said it didn't like to be disturbed. No one told them about the room upstairs, the one with the locked door, the one that was always cold, the one where the smell of cigar smoke lingered, even though no one smoked. Every night, past midnight, a chair creaked behind that door. A heavy presence stirred in the silence. And sometimes, just sometimes, footsteps could be heard pacing slowly, then stopping, waiting. Then came the sound of a breath, not theirs, and the shadow of a man sitting still in the chair, raising a trembling hand and shaking his head, no. The first night was just odd. The furniture creaked more than usual. The wind pushed the windows with unnatural force. But it was on the second night that Lily, just 7 years old, showed up in her parents' room, eyes wide. "There's an old man upstairs. He saw me and he did this." She raised her hand slowly and shook her finger in disapproval. "No." Michael rushed upstairs. The door at the end of the hallway was slightly ajar. It was the only one with peeling paint, like it refused to be repaired. The scent of old wood mixed with cigar smoke clung to the air. But no one was there. Only a chair, old, rocking, facing the window, as if someone had just left it. The next morning, Jenna found small piles of salt scattered on the windowsills. No one in the family had placed them there. Did someone come in last night? But the neighbors, few and distant, avoided eye contact. One old man, his speech slow and gaze unfocused, only said, "You opened the door, didn't you?" He doesn't like that. This house was his, and what he hid in that room wasn't meant to be found. On the third night, the terror crept in. Lights flickered. The television turned on by itself, static hissing in the silence. Tyler, the eldest child, screamed from upstairs. When the parents rushed up, he was locked inside the forbidden room, which he swore had been open when he entered. He was in the chair. He looked at me, Dad. And then the door slammed shut. The door wouldn't budge. For agonizing minutes, they could only hear Tyler's rapid breathing and the creak of wood, like someone gently rocking in the dark. When Michael finally forced the door open, Tyler was in shock, staring at the floor. In the corner, scratched into the wood by fingernails, was one word: leave. That night, none of them slept. Tyler refused to speak for hours. When he finally did, his voice trembled. He whispered something, but it wasn't in English. Michael tried to rationalize it. Sleepwalking, hallucinations. But deep down, he felt it too. Something had shifted in the house. Something had woken up. The next morning, the air in the house was heavier. The family dog, Scout, refused to go upstairs. He growled at the stairway, tail low, ears back. When Jenna tried to carry him up, he snarled and jumped from her arms, running outside and refusing to return. That evening, as dusk crawled in and shadows stretched across the floor, Jenna discovered an old rusted key behind a loose brick in the kitchen wall. No one had seen it before. It was cold, unnaturally cold. "What if it opens something upstairs?" she said, half joking. Michael didn't laugh. Later that night, the children were asleep when a loud crash echoed from upstairs. The couple ran to the source. It was the locked room. The door, once sealed tight, now stood wide open. The chair was empty. The salt on the windowsills had vanished, and the mirror on the wall, previously covered in dust, was now perfectly clean. As Michael stepped in, the door slammed shut behind them. The lights flickered. The mirror shimmered and reflected something that wasn't there. In the reflection, Behind Michael and Jenna stood the old man. His eyes were hollow, skin pale and stretched. One hand pointed to the closet in the corner, the other made the same trembling no motion. The room dropped in temperature. Jenna's breath became visible. The closet door creaked open on its own. Inside, buried beneath a dusty blanket, was an old, blood-stained trunk. From the trunk came a sound that didn't belong in this world, a muffled scratching. Then, whispers, multiple voices speaking in unison, in that same foreign language Tyler had heard. Jenna backed away. Michael stood frozen. The rocking chair began to move on its own again, and in the mirror, the old man was screaming silently, shaking his head violently, his eyes now black voids. Then, everything went still. Behind them, the children screamed. They bolted downstairs, hearts pounding, only to find the children in the living room, safe but shaken. He was standing at the bottom of the stairs, Lily sobbed, blocking the hallway, and he looked angry. That night, no one spoke much, but Michael knew something had to be done. He stayed up late, researching the property records, and that's when he found it. The house had once belonged to George Hilton, a Civil War veteran turned recluse. He died in 1927 under unusual circumstances. Locals believed he had gone mad, guarding something he refused to let anyone touch. After his death, the estate sat abandoned for years. Every family that moved in left within months, sometimes weeks. The next morning, Michael opened the trunk in daylight. Jenna watched nervously as he removed layers of rotting cloth, until he found it. A small wooden box, wrapped in an old Confederate flag. Inside were bones, tiny, fragile. Children's bones. Jenna gasped, stepping back. Suddenly, the air around them shifted. A gust of wind slammed every door in the house shut at once. The mirrors shattered. The lights went out. And then, George appeared. Not as a flickering shadow, not as a whisper. He stood before them, solid, his eyes hollow, his mouth twisted in rage. And yet, he didn't attack. He pointed at the bones, then at the floor beneath the trunk, and again shook his head. No, Michael realized George wasn't keeping people out to protect himself. He was protecting everyone from what lay beneath. They pulled up the floorboards. Beneath them was an old iron trap door. Jenna hesitated. Michael opened it. The stench hit first. Then came the moans, low, inhuman. They looked down and saw a narrow stairwell leading into total darkness, etched with strange ancient symbols. This wasn't just a haunted room, it was a prison, and George Hilton had spent the last decades making sure it stayed sealed. Until now. The stairwell beneath the trapdoor seemed endless. Michael held a flashlight. Jenna clutched a crowbar. Both trembled, not just from fear, but from the growing sense that they had crossed a line no one was meant to cross. Tyler stayed behind to protect Lily, locking them in the car with the keys. As they descended, the walls grew damp. The air became thicker, heavier. At the bottom was a chamber, small, stone-lined, lit faintly by an unnatural green glow pulsing from the walls like veins. In the center, an altar, surrounded by 5 broken child-sized coffins. On the altar was a book, bound in human skin. Before they could move, a sound rose from the corners, a wet, slithering shuffle, and then, from the darkness, it emerged. Not a ghost, not a demon, something older. Its form constantly shifted, bones cracking in wrong directions, mouths in the wrong places, and yet, its eyes stayed locked on them. It had been feeding on souls, children, for centuries, and now it was free. Jenna screamed. Michael swung the crowbar, but it passed right through. The entity whispered in that ancient, unholy language. Blood dripped from the walls. The green glow intensified. But then, George appeared. He stood between them and the creature, arms outstretched, shouting in Latin. The spectre of the old man burned like a lantern. The entity shrank back, shrieking. George turned his ghostly eyes to Michael and nodded. "Seal it." Michael grabbed the book, placed it back on the altar and slammed it shut. The ground trembled. Screams filled the chamber. The entity was being pulled back, into the earth, into the bones, into the very stone. With one final cry, it vanished, and George faded. They resealed the floor, buried the bones in consecrated ground, and the room, they bricked it up. The house no longer whispered at night. The mirrors stopped bleeding. The dog returned. But sometimes, just after midnight, you can still hear the rocking chair creak. And if you ever step too close to that part of the house, you might see George's ghost, still shaking his head, still guarding the secret you should have never found.